Hey Shmuel, how are you?
Hi, good night from Tel Aviv. Never a dull moment.
Never a dull moment. So today's news is Obama. We just heard news that Obama is planning his trip to Israel in the spring, in late spring. I have a few questions for you. Why now?
Well, why now? Elections are over both in the United States and in Israel, so no one can blame the president that he's traveling for political purposes. Um, it's time. He wanted to go to Israel for quite some time now, and this issue has been an issue with many of the people criticizing Obama, saying why wasn't he traveling to Israel? So I guess he found the right window. He needs to go to the Middle East to talk about many issues of regional concerns, especially Syria, the new government in Egypt, and other issues. So he's going to travel to the region, and he'll go through Israel as well. He'll meet with Netanyahu. These two men didn't have great relations in the last 4 years, but they have to learn to live with one another because both of them just earned their next terms. So I guess it's as good time as any.
There's going to be an expectation of some accomplishment there. Is it going to? He's going to want to walk away or arrive in order to and show something for the travels. Do you think there's anything he can get in terms of movement on the peace process, movement on anything that's going to make it worth his while?
Well, here we need to separate two things. There are some things that the president might want from the Prime Minister of Israel, and these are things they will not want to talk about. And I refer especially to the issue of Iran. As you might remember, the Israeli Prime Minister already set a deadline for Iran, a red line for Iran that is coming this summer. And if the president is traveling to Israel this spring, he might want to travel to Israel because he needs the prime minister to give him some more leeway. He wants the prime minister to wait some more before he reaches this red line and turns into action. But this is something they will not talk about publicly, and I agree. The president would want to have some sort of accomplishment related to the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. I would assume that in their phone conversation last week, the prime minister at least hinted, or maybe was just saying that he was going to somewhat compromise on some of the issues in order for Israel and the Palestinians to be able to go back to the negotiating table. I think expectations have been lowered enough for people to understand that an Obama visit is not a sign that peace is coming next week. So he will have to have something, but it doesn't have to be a huge thing for this to be seen as a success.
And what's the president going to get out of it politically? He's already won a second term. He's what's the upside for him politically? Anything?
No, I don't think he's doing it for political purposes. I think President Obama is traveling to the Middle East because the area is now in great need of some measure of American involvement. He needs to coordinate the policies of different countries concerning Syria. Syria is on the verge of collapse, and someone needs to sort out a way out of this mess if and when the Assad regime eventually collapses. And he's going to enter a new round of negotiations with Iran. And again, he would want to coordinate with different countries in the region his policies following the next round of talks. So I don't think this is about politics. I think this is pure foreign policy.
It's I guess we could say it's unlikely Israel would now attack Iran while the president's there for sure. So we're not looking at a late spring attack and probably not leading up to it either, right?
Well, according to reports today, the visit is going to be in late March. So this is pretty early.
Pretty soon.
It's before Passover. So I don't think anyone expected Israel to take military action against Iran so early. when Prime Minister Netanyahu was speaking at the UN, he was speaking about summer, about maybe July or August as his red line. So I don't think anyone expected Israel to act in March, and anyway, March is safe for us now.
You've pointed out in your columns for us that Obama was about as unpopular among Israeli Jews as he is popular among American Jews. How do you think he's going to be received there by the Israeli Jews, and do you think this will affect his popularity?
Well, we don't yet know what Obama is going to do here. He might just pass through Israel and do this as a very short visit. I'm sure he'll be nicely received by the Prime Minister. I'm sure the official ceremonies will all be very nice. As for the Israeli public, in all polls that we've seen thus far, Israelis, it's not that they dislike Obama as much as they don't truly trust him to be a great friend of Israel. And I would assume that the recent news they received concerning the appointment of Chuck Hagel to be Secretary of Defense would not help him with the Israeli public. Such visit might be of some importance, but as I've argued many times before, the Israeli public is pretty much tired of nice speeches. I think for Obama to regain the trust of the Israeli public, he'll have to actually do something. Not nice speeches will not do the trick.
So, last question. I was going to ask you, what's the one thing you would recommend Obama to do to kind of rebuild the trust with the Israeli public so that he can get the kinds of things he wants done in the Middle East?
Well, look, making such recommendations is complicated. Of course, for him to regain the trust of the Israeli public and the Israeli government, the best measure for him to take would be something concerning Iran. Now, I don't think an American president would want to make a decision on Iran based on whether this will make the Israeli public happier about him. It all depends on his policy vis-a-vis Iran. I don't think he has a window of opportunity with the Palestinians, not with Syria on the verge of collapse, not with Egypt being in such turmoil. I think for Obama to calm things down and take care of the Iranian issue is the first priority. And if all things eventually go his way, then the Israeli public will learn to like him, or at least not to dislike him eventually.
Okay, one last question. I lied. I'm going to ask you one more because it's about Chuck Hagel. You mentioned it. It's unbelievable to me, and some other commentators have looked at it, the number of times Israel's been mentioned in the Hagel hearings versus countries like China or North Korea, countries that present real geopolitical challenges to the United States. What does that do? You know Washington as well as anybody in the Israeli world. What do you think it does for Israel's image in America in terms of policy, for it to get so much focus in these hearings for Secretary of Defense?
Well, I think Israelis, to some extent, get a kick out of it. They see such hearings as proof that Israel is truly important to Americans. They don't really understand that the fact that Israel is mentioned so many times is not just good for Israel. It also has a downside for Israel because of some publics within American society might feel that Israel is getting too much attention from Washington officials. In the Hagel context, I think Israel became some kind of a litmus test for the defense minister, for the defense secretary, and I think that's why Israel was mentioned so many times. It's not really about the policies of Hagel concerning Israel. It's not that Israel is the most important topic with which the Secretary of Defense is going to have to deal with. I think Israel and Hagel's comments regarding Israel became some kind of a symbol to the many grievances that especially Republican legislators had with this appointment. And that's why Israel was mentioned so many times.
But doesn't the fact that it got so much mention and so much attention almost prove Hagel's earlier assertion about the power of the pro-Israel lobby?
Well, that's why I said there is a downside for Israel to be mentioned as many times as it was mentioned in these hearings.
Okay, we're Jews, so we're gonna end on the downside. It's good to see you, Shmuel.
Good to
We'll
see
be
you
in touch
too.
the next time something happens. Talk to you later. Bye.